Yidawala anu ngapaberik otipati jagat nata raja triloka. Deka catur di jalana Yidawala parantos.
This is called Facing Disease, Combating COVID, Pacing the Void, and other things. It's something that I did for a conference fairly recently. I want to put down at the bottom, Otong Rasta, Abasunaria, Irawati Durban, Ibu Sawitri, Undang, Bulan, who I just saw yesterday, who is back from her cancer treatments and was doing a beautiful presentation in dance. And I also want to apologize in advance for the shortcomings or my own lack of knowledge. So this is something that this period of pandemic made me start to think about. It's very much a work in progress. It's about things that have puzzled me for some time. My background, of course, was I happened, I think I saw a sign on the wall somewhere about the Center for World Music. I had just come back from hitchhiking to India and spending 6 months there and becoming enamored of performance there. I was given a scholarship to go to the Center for World Music in 1974 and had the privilege of learning Wayang Golek from Patrucita at that point in time and being exposed to Patnugraha, Irawati Durban. I was totally amazed because I was seeing world-class performers, and I had just been sort of hitchhiking through Asia and become very excited about what was going on in the villages. But to have the access to great masters was one of the benefits, I think, of being in a country that at that point in time was sort of considered at its peak, and people were interested in coming to. And it was a wonderful experience that I think all of us who were touched by that will never forget. This, of course, led me to think that I had had a Commedia dell'arte troupe. And when I walked into the Center for World Music, it looked like everybody was doing music and dance. And I didn't know anything about music or dance. I was a theater person. So when I saw the puppets over in one corner, I said, oh, that looks like theater, and started going over there. So that's basically how I did it. I thought that one person could do it. I had somehow neglected to look at the 15 or 16, or in some instances, 20 people who were behind. And I was just lucky that I ended up in Santa Cruz, where I had the opportunity of working with Undang, with all of his wonderful students, such as Henry Spiller or Andrew, who can answer all your musical questions much better than I. But as a result of that, I was able to do Wayang fairly frequently here. Other things that I've done are organized exhibitions, which can be masks or puppets. That was recently I've been doing some Indian exhibits. This is one for the Puppetry, Center for Puppetry Arts in Atlanta. Are you seeing this thing? This is mass puppets and scroll paintings and boxes, things like that. That's not moving now. Let's see, this move it. Fairly recently, maybe a year and a half ago, I did a Thai Cambodian exhibition. This was a Malaysian Makyong and Wayang Kelantan exhibit that we were doing here. That was a talk that as a result of having a gamelan here, we can frequently do Wayang Orang. These are some of the more recent productions. Ramayana performance we did maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Mughal miniatures was Radha Krishna stories. One down in the corner is a production that we did at University of Malaya with students there as a student project. It's Laila Manjun. But this particular paper is coming from watching Purbo Asmaro's Sudamala performance, which he did on March 25th. And that was something that caused me, because I'm the president of Unima USA right now, which is the national puppetry organization. I wrote in that blog, can puppetry cure in a time of crisis? Most of the online interventions this week by and for puppeteers are tips on good online clips, mini-making methods for housebound youngsters, and messages of goodwill, as with the Unima USA and Puppeteers of America rendition of You Are My Sunshine for the gathered membership for World Puppetry Day. But in Solo, Indonesia, Dalang Purbo Asmara responded to the announcement of the rising coronavirus, the death of Indonesian President Jokowi's wife, by staging a ruwatan, exorcism or making safe or purification performance of the Sudamala story. Like all of Indonesia, he was practicing quarantine. The musicians, the audience, all the spectacular elements of the Wayang were gone. However, the Dalang, as a curative force, was doing a ritual story, and he was present. He came in bearing the requisite offerings for his live-streamed ritual. He apologized in advance for any errors or shortcomings, playing his own accompaniment on the gendare, adding percussive accents for fights with the katrek, manipulating without any assistance to hand figures. He performed the complex Sudamala story, part of a ritual protection against forces that threaten. The Sudamala tale tells how the high goddess of the universe in her demonic form, i.e. Durga, is trying to get a mother, Kunti, to sacrifice her stepson, Sadeva. When Kunti refuses, a demon enters her body. Sadeva is tied to a tree for sacrifice. Sadeva's refusal of the advances of the demonic Durga or her acolytes results in the power of Shiva, who is Durga's husband, of course, entering his body, and soon he is free, and he frees his mother, who has been driven into being Durga, and his family. The crisis is averted. Dalang Purbo titled the YouTube version as Doa Untuk Dunia, a prayer for the world. So this made me start to think about why within Asian culture you find this use of puppets and masks, and you find it other ways, places too. Let me see if I can move forward to do this kind of curative thing. And I'm going to talk a little bit now about this performance. At the very end, you can go and look at it online. This is, you were hearing this particular Dalang, who is Dadan Sunandar. He's the son of Asep Sunaria, who died maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And you see he was doing si Tapat Ngalawan. It's the clowns, the red-faced clown, who is the major clown of the Sundanese Wayang Golek, fights against Corona. And there you see Gadagacha is using his weapon to shoot down Corona. So this was a celebration that was done for the 379th, I think, anniversary of the Kabupaten of Bandung that he had been commissioned to do. It was an empty auditorium. The musicians, at least, were wearing their masks. And as you'll see, if I can move it forward, pretty soon Astrajinga or Chapat, he's the red-faced clown, had his mask on. He learned about it from the Bupati of Bandung was up during the beginning of the clown scene and told Chapat that everyone had to put on masks. So there he got his mask. And pretty soon Gacha was there. You notice that Gacha didn't know how to put on his mask right, so his nose is coming out of it. And pretty soon he is teaching the ogres. The ogres have come because they want a victim, an offering, and they've decided, they've been told by the Kurawa that a good victim to prevent them from having disease is Astrajinga or Chapat. So they're coming to get him, and Chapat, who has now learned from the Bupati how to avoid coronavirus, is there lecturing them about how they need to wear masks, how all of the ogres of the world have to stay 6 feet apart, and that they all should just Chiching di Ima, sit at home. And there is a song that they made up, and you can go listen to at the end, which is Chiching di Ima, which is sort of the theme song of this particular lakon, which Dadan has done a number of times during this period of coronavirus. So, of course, Bandung is not the only place that is having all of this. The image at the top here, this is Balinese, and this is a very beautiful Lady Corona. Some places in East Java were doing a sekabumi, you know, and it looks like a Kala kind of character there, the monster that we'll talk a little bit about later, to prevent the disease from going on. This is a principal in a Catholic school over in, I think it's Japara, who was doing his version of Wayang with various Corona puppets. And here we see Samar, of course, confronting Corona. So it's certainly not the only place that they're doing their coronavirus things. Over in Bali, of course, this was a Sidha Karya ceremony, which is being done for purification to get rid of Corona. This Jauk-like character, if you'll notice the palms of his hands, has Corona. He's out doing coronavirus education. So that people can avoid the disease. They say Bali has done really well. So all of this started to make me think about what is this kind of use of small figures, or sometimes very large figures, that we definitely see in a number of places in Asia. But of course, it's not only confined to there. We see certain things within Africa, use of corn husk dolls among some of the northeastern tribes to sort of throw away disease and danger. So why is it that this miniaturization or magnification allows us for our brief lifespans to envision some things that are bigger than us, things that we can't see, such as a virus, which is passing invisibly through our communities? Puppets, in many contexts, have been put to work delivering souls from hellish pains, allowing initiates to step from the mundane to the cosmic, as in the use of Taoist marionettes to pace the void. We encounter them used in alleviating deadly diseases, mental incapacities, and of course, we're seeing them put to work against COVID. So why puppets and masks? Why are these sometimes the preferred theatrical event? I think it's because for ordinary people, ordinary stories, ordinary bodies make a better representation of those materials about us and here and now. But when you want something that is bigger, that is more hidden, more mysterious, masks and puppets are used for their non-realism. They can carry the weight of the unseen, of the heavenly, of the ancestor. They are bigger or smaller, more ugly or more beautiful. It's this extra feature of the puppet and mask that comes into play in part in these kinds of performances. It is not trying to stay here where we exist and we are. And stylized figures can deal sometimes with disasters, why crops fail, why people go mad, why wars are allowed and stupidity runs rampant. If you believe in the possibility of spheres beyond the normal life, as most religions do, these figures can show us things about those areas, can explain how disaster can strike us, who we believe have done so little that is wrong. Surely it has to do with demons. It can show us beauty that is transcendent, that can penetrate our lives, but usually it's just there for a moment, and then it's gone. It can show us certain aspects of our real relations to the past, our ancestors, and the privilege that we have as their descendants because we live through them. It is these areas of moreness that tend to be good for figures, for masks, for puppets. Because they move when we activate them, they can help us in creating the most hellish of hells, where the evil, be they parents, bosses, even presidents, will pay for their mistakes. In mask and puppetry, heavenly beauties can appear, and our gaze, whether it's male or female, has no need to repercussions attached. Figures are great for representing ancestors because, like our progenitors, these objects are dead. And yet, even as the dead animate us, so we can animate them. So I'm going to think briefly about these bodies and visualizations, primarily in Indonesian curing, but I will refer briefly to some Indian things or Chinese, which I think may have impacted some of the thinking within the Indonesian realm. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the stories that are used for curing or saving. Pat Sumarsam and others may want to correct me or add ones on. But when I was doing this the other day, I divided it into three kinds of stories that are used in these kinds of purification rituals. One I called the exorcism. This is sort of your basic ruwatan. The murwa kala, or origin of kala, that we see certainly most frequently in West Java. It's murwa kala almost all the time. So this is a story of going up and transcending where you are. The story's sort of headline is the bad are reminded of their divine origin. They didn't quite know, but once they get it into their head, they are not going to be bad anymore. So this is a story that we have in the ruwatan Murwakala, where it is Kala, the god of time, who is usually ruwated by Vishnu, occasionally by Batara Guru, depending on your dawang, but mostly by Vishnu. I would say it's a similar story in the purification of Durga that we see in the Sudamala. There it's Sadeva, who ruats Devi Durga and then takes care of his family. I would say the Chalonarong story is basically the same story. It's Rangda, the widow witch. She's ruated by Barada, who is embodying the Barong, who is Vishnu, who is Manaspati Raja, who is the placenta, the Ari and our oldest brother. I'll talk about the brothers a little later on. So that's one kind of story of getting away from your demonic, going up. The next kind of story is the visitation. Usually this is a bidadari, but sometimes it can be, it could be a guy, but it's mostly heavenly goddesses coming down for a visitation on earth. I would say the Sri Sadhana story is this goddess of rice and her brother coming down to earth. Eventually, at the end of the story, that yields rice, sugar palm, and all good things. Related stories, probably the Jakatayub and the Nawang Wulang story, where the farmer takes the wings of a bidadari, and the bidadari is one of the Pleiades. The Mintaraga story, where Arjuna is doing his meditation, and the goddesses Suprabha and the other bidadari come down, the 7 goddesses come down, is really the same sort of story, but Arjuna gets to go up to heaven for a period of time. But it's only a short period of time. It does get him the weapon that he's going to need to win the Bharata Yuddha or things like that. But the story of how the Godhead interfaces with us is basically, it comes down into our world here with us for a short period of time. So that's category number 2. The third category I call is about release from hell, or I call it go to hell. It's a story of how the hero can create salvation for his ancestors, and to a certain extent, I would say, for himself. So the story of Bhima Suwarga that we see in Bali, where Bhima goes and gets his parents from hell and releases everybody else too. The Devaruchi story, where he goes down into the ocean, fights the ogres, gets the naga, this, that, and the other thing, and then gets self-realization, I would say, is a variation, a Javanese, more Muslim variation on the same story. So the exorcism is going up, transcendence, the bad are brought to realize they're really divine in origin. The story involves Bhattara Kala comes to heaven. He's been made by Bhattara Guru's sperm when he tried to rape his wife, Uma. Very complicated story, but anyway, he doesn't know who he is. His sperm gone wild, comes up to heaven, wants to know what his name is, and wants to eat humans because he has tasted the blood of Devi Durga, who cut her finger when she was cooking for him one day. So his father, being the way that gods are, gives into his child and gives him certain people that he can eat, but then he writes the aksara, the mantra on his chest, on his back, various parts of his body. And anyone who can read those mantra is really a dalang kandubuana who can exorcise kala. So this is really a performance that I'll talk about a little bit later, as I see related to the idea of nyasa within Indian culture, a kind of meditation where you put different syllables or mantra on different parts of your body. So we have some control over this. We can learn it from our teachers, but we need that teacher, the Dalang exorcist, to help us up out of our more demonic behaviors so we can go up and transcend. So this is just an image of Abasunaria doing a ruwatan performance. This is Bhattara Guru, High God of the Universe, Shiva. This is Kala here. This is the sword that he's going to give to him. And this is the letter that says which people he is allowed to eat. story is more complicated. This is Javanese version. This is again Kala. This is Durga, who always, usually, certainly in Sunda, always appears within it, and one of her followers as well. So this is a very widespread story. And here's Wayang Kulit version of, this would be called Jatusmati. If you're in Sunda, sometimes in Bali, you know, maybe you can call them Kumara or something else, Kala. Sapu Jagat is important. That, of course, is the person who sweeps the world. He usually turns up at the end of a Sundanese wayang to sweep away all of the bad spirits. So it's the last thing that you would do in a kind of bersih desa performance or a ruwatan. And this again is Durga, who, I mean, she's actually, she has a case, I would say, in that why is she sent down to be the bad one when it was Shiva who was raping her, but whatever. We'll keep on going. So a similar kind of going up, I think, is involved in these big statues that we see with the Ogo Ogo for Golongan. That's another Batara Kala thing. That's a male exorcism. I think the process of the Sudamala, the character who is exorcised, is Durga, or here, you know, she's in the Sundanese version, Permoni, and this is Sadeva, that's Bali, this is Sunda, but that's sort of the female version of it. In West Java, they don't do that story very often. It's usually Kala. And that story of Sudamala is closely related, I believe, to the Durga story. This is a Sudamala story. I think it's Chandi Jago. And the same story, although we're given a different history within the Rangda Barong that we see in Bali. And this, of course, is Vishnu, and this is Uma or Durga. She will be returned, hopefully, by the end of the performance to her more peaceful form. So this is a story of going up. The next one is the coming down, the visitation kind of story. And this story too is, I think it's sort of hard for the women. They are only staying because they've had their wings in general stolen, except for Lady Suprabha, who has a mission, and she needs to help save the world. Therefore, she comes down and stays for a longer period of time with Arjuna. But the natural tendency of a bidadari, or a heavenly transcendent figure, is to come down for a short period of time and return to heaven. I would say we have less control over this story. It is the luck, it is the blessing, it is the willingness of the divine to come down and manifest itself within the world that we hope for as human beings, that is implied within these stories. Something is coming, it's something good. The hero is trying to get it. It may be a heavenly bidadari, and I would say all of the Waihu stories are variations on this. There it's the heavenly power, doesn't have to be in a female form, but these are stories of visitation. So this is Devi Sri, who is coming down to earth. She will, of course, die in the process of that, and of course is separated from her brother, Sadhana. Coming down story is Nawang Wulan and Jakatayub. That's their child there, and you can see she's going back to the Pleiades. This story, of course, we find in Java, Bali, Sunda. This is Didik Noni Towok doing a no version that was Hagoromo Nawang Wulan to combine the Japanese version, which is one of the most highly classed no stories of this vision of transcendence, which comes down into the world, and how the hunter captures it. We find it in the fairy and the woodcutter story in Korea. That's a new melodrama, same story. The menorah that we find in mainland Southeast Asia, the Jataka story version, is of course the same. The final thing for purification is these stories of going to hell. We descend into hell to save our ancestors. All of us can do this, really. We have to sweep away the anger, the guilt, the bad blood, and start everything anew. This is why the Chinese have their hungry ghost festivals, to make sure that all those angry or bad or negative things are swept away. Bhima Swarga is one of these stories. Here you see Bhima with Toilen and Murda, who is about to cross over. This probably Yama or one of his denizens. And here's Bhima with his father, Pandu, and this must be Madrin here, bringing them up out of hell. And you can see all of the rest of us clinging to his body to pass out at the same time. This, of course, is the same story as Madhyalana. It's the same story as Jesus Christ, his 3 days from Good Friday until Easter Sunday when he comes out. Mulan, of course, rescuing his mother. Here's the monk who has come down into hell. And here's his poor mother who's being beaten for having eaten meat, or did she give meat to monks? Something terrible like that is saving her from these cauldrons. This again is a salvation story. The Kunjarakarna story that I was just reading today, and if I have time, we'll read a little bit for you at the end, is a similar thing of a demon who goes down to hell, sees what that hellishness is, and that is going to transform him and the world, so he's not going to do all the bad stuff that we see happening in our current political environment. So what's this all about? These are stories about the participation of humans in other worlds. The worlds of heaven, how it can come down to us, of hell, how we see shadows of it here, but it's even worse down there, and how we relate to some of those ancestors, the world of the dead and the unknown. If we can understand some of these aspects, we can cure ourselves, we can cure the world. Miniaturization is something that allows us to see, to manipulate a process which is about our human potential, our potential of perfection going up, the possibility of divine visitation coming down, us to witness it and hold that memory, and the possibility of our defeating death, our relating to the past, our freeing our ancestors, letting go of guilt. So what has this to do with Topeng and Wayang and gamelan? I believe that the things that you see within certainly West Java and other places are really related. These are curing performances which allow you to see your differences. The mask, the puppet, is a tool. You see here the Topeng, this is the alus. It's these four. This rumiang in the center sometimes goes away. But if you're doing Wayang Golek or you're doing Topeng mask dance, it's these two white masks and the pink and the red mask, Klana over there, which are the essential and the central characters. Rumiang is there because you need a fifth thing in the center, which is half and half. And that is the unity or oneness that much of this is about, which is why there is one dalang, why there is one dancer in the most important mass dances, such as Topeng, Pajagan in Bali or Topeng Cirebon that are about really related to some of these ideas of curing. The benefit of this is you have to understand all of the different characters within you. It is a relationship of the microcosm, your simple body, and the macrocosm. But because we are born in a certain class, because we have a certain sex, because we are a certain age, we have limited experience. Therefore, it is by using these tools of miniaturization, of transformation, that you can stretch out the person, and that person will become a Dalang. If you look at, this is a Topeng Cirebon chest. If you look at the shape, it's very much like a kayon. This is all goes back to the kayon, or the tree of life. And if you look at the little thing that's here on the top of your sobra or headdress, it is again the kayon. And the idea is all of those things are necessary to acknowledge, to move from our basest instincts toward our more positive things. So the mask or the puppet freezes the world into 4 or 5. These are usually the refined, the semi-refined, the warrior, the emotionally uncontrolled. The most important are Kwana and Panji, although sometimes Panji disappears and you'll just have the female in here. Sometimes this will change to 3, sometimes it'll just be 2, but in its ideal formation for West Java, it's gonna be 4 or 5 if you do the center point within it. So these puppets or masks freeze the world into this. This probably originates from the idea of Dulur Empat Kalima Pancher, the 4 brothers and the 5th as center. These are the spirit siblings that come into the world with us. As you know, those of you who spent time in Indonesia, you are never alone. You are always surrounded, even when you're solitary, by your spirit siblings, who are the placenta, the taliari, the umbilical cord, the bloody show, the amniotic fluid, things like that. They came into the world with you. You plant, usually in West Java, you plant your placenta and you go back and visit it at certain times, things like that, if you want to be a good Dalang or those types of things. I would say for this reason, these spirit siblings who can be both positive and noble, they can be very helpful to you, but if you don't treat them right, your bad days, they will turn into those demons that create your prang kembang that you have to overcome to reach your fullness and adulthood. So being in balance with this system, both positive and negative, that is the whole human being, I feel is interrelated to the way these character types get defined and why it is related to a solo performer doing all of the masks or all of the puppets. I think it's for this reason that you have Arjuna here as the baby, and these are the 4 brothers, the clowns. Or Arjuna, you know, it's the middle brother, and then he's got his 4 guys around him. That's why the Pandava are one of these systems. Why in the Prang Kembang, you know, you may have these 4 ogres who appear. Not everybody uses all of them. And this is related, of course, to the way these different gods are in the different directions. Very often Bayu or wind is conceptualized as the center, and Bayu is sometimes the most powerful. So some of that stuff. This, of course, can get expanded to the concept of the 9 directions. We find this especially in Bali. Here you see the different gods up there for the Ngawangsa. This is just the general directions, north, south, east, west. To find yourself as center, you have to know all of these different things. You can have more complex iterations of them. But I really believe that the reason we have Sunan Kali Jaga, who created Wayang, who is supposed to be the progenitor of Topeng, at least that's what people will say in Cirebon, unless they sometimes say Sunan Panggung, who they say is Sunan Kali Jaga's son, or Pangeran Bagusan, who is the student of Sunan Kali Jaga. But all of these guys, who I do not think were wearing these Islamic, Middle Eastern kinds of turban when they were creating Wayang and doing the different pupus or creating gamelan. But these guys who created Wayang Golek and Topeng, whatever, focus around the center point, Sunan Kali Jaga, their representations of these 4 directions and then the quadrants in between. If you know all of these guys and all of your powers and all of these arts that go with them, you will know everything. You will know the what and who of what it is to be a human being or a being within the world or a deva within the cosmos. Everything that is good and bad is already potential inside each of us. Of course, we need some prompts. We need to learn a bit of music, a dance, to pick up a puppet, to give us clarity about what these things are. But these strengths and evils in each human being are found within music, dance, plays performed with these masks and puppets. People get a sense of the macrocosm if they study the microcosm, dancing masks, playing with puppets. This relates, of course, to Morwa Kala, the origin of Kala, in which this is Kala here, who has these mantra written on him. This is an image of Nyasa within an Indian framework of different syllables that you meditate on different parts of your body here, generally moving from your most base, sort of up your spine, through and over the top of your head. So it is this kind of one person, one performer, who has to learn how to split himself into the 4 directions to understand the positive and the negative potentialities within himself and his siblings. The similar idea, of course, is within the Dawang Topeng. This is Bu Irawati Durban dancing, and this is Asap Sunandar. These ideas, of course, are not confined to Indonesia. We find them related to some of these ideas that we see within Taoist cosmology. There, some of the purification ceremonies and puppets are the most important within the southern part of China, down in Fujian and other regions where lots of people came to Indonesia. These immortals are divided out to the directions and the center. Similar ideas of elements. I didn't go through all of them. Or the Panchakosika, which are the Buddhist or brothers that are related to an incarnation of Shiva, which is related to performance kinds of things, over in India, but we continually find within the performing arts that have moved out from Hindu, Buddhist, and Islamic perspectives, some of these ideas of how these elements mix within each of us and how we can better learn to access them. So this all says that you can go out and learn these dances. This is a diagram for pacing the void, the Taoist version we have. Some of these ceremonies seem to rise in the Tang dynasty from about the 3rd century. And it's dancing the Big Dipper because that's one of the central planet system. This leads, of course, to some of these ideas of the body that are interrelated to some of the things that we see moving from top to bottom, or bottom is where we start, up toward the top. Here you can see someone, if that thing will go away. Anyway, he's dancing the dipper right up in here. This is weaving maid and her cowherd boy who only meet once a year. But what you're basically doing is using stories and other things and different characters to help you move up your spine to reach these slots atop your head. This is a process that is related to the concept of nidan, which is going back and finding your origins, sort of like those Zenish things of what is your face before you were born, or the sounds of one hand clapping. Well, you were a little baby. You were just like Kala, who didn't know who he was or where he was from, and has to learn what that process of generation was and how his generation is also the generation of the world. So, if you think the world seems like it's in chaos, if you're wondering, where in the world is Dr. Fauci? Who is it that can save us? How can we get masks? If you don't know what to do and you find the demonic is whispering in one ear and the beatific is there within the other, but then realize you just have to start with one of these ideas of meditation. Go down, start at your base, your bottom. Realize you can just rise up that spine. Realize those serpents going back and forth. Those are your tunadi or things like that. Your eyes are the sun and the moon. If you can get past the craziness, take that trip to the top of your spine, use your head, let inspiration visit, if only for a moment, you can free us from death. Your ancestors will love it, and you will have descendants. So with this, the flower has been picked, its fragrance spread, close the gate to Vishnu's palace. This, of course, is the Achintya version of Shiva in Balinese Wayang, which would go behind the Kayon in that. This, of course, is Samar, who's the exact same thing. A lot of Sundanese Dalans will put him right behind the Kayon because the Dalang, Samar, and the Kayon are all of these images of the oneness, and the practice of Topeng or Wayang is splitting these characters out into their 4 directions, recognizing the inherent demonic and the potential beatific, and choosing the right hand. Okay, and that's what I have to say. There's one more. If if people want to go, this is a YouTube kind of thing that was done by Daran Sunaria. And if you go in 1 hour, 15 minutes and 40 seconds, they're doing their coronavirus song, which is going to hopefully ruwat Bandung.
Corona, virus corona, sumebar kamar capada, waspada, masih ngiyatna, sabab jadi marah bahaya, geus jadi bibit penyakit, melit ngait ngarurukit, tong-tong ingkati imah, buku pancen pamarentah. Yo, cicing di imah, wayahna ulah merudah. Cicing di imah, sing sadrah baris sumerah. Cicing di imah, dekendat bari ibadah. Cicing di imah, tanda silih pikanya. Halo.
Jurang cicing di imah, pilu program pemerintahan. Mulai di kamamana, hingga
Yo, sini.
Virus corona sumebar di masa pada, waspada masih iya, sabab jadi marah bahaya, terus jadi bibit penyakit, main pelit ngarurukit, omatong ingkati imah, buku pancen pamarentah. Cicing di imah,
Ampun ting bos dera,
Halus. Cicing di imah,
sandra baris
ayah kawannya asik. Cicing di imah, cicing di imah, sakali deui. Cicing di imah, cicing di imah, sangkan wabah gancang musnah. Gusti nu agung parinkeun elmu linung, pikeun panuntung sangkan virus ilang curig nyingkir setan.
There were some things in the chat. Tiptoning and Mintaraga are the same thing. Sapu Jagat, the puppet that you use for them. I showed one of the central Java, or at least North Coast, kind of Sapu Jagat things, but I've seen various kinds of demons being used. Not everybody has the elephant-headed one for it. So people do a lot of substitution, but the idea of Sapu Jagat usually comes at the end of a Bursi Desa, or Kala gets all of the offerings at the end of a ruwatan, although the musicians get all the offerings, but Kala gets them first and then the musicians take them home. But a small portion is put aside for Sabujagat and for Durga. They're being bribed.
Yeah, it's me, Kathy, Pak Sumarsa.
Yeah.
Just corrections I would like to make. It was the President Jokowi's mother who passed away.
Oh, his mother.
Right. Yeah.
I misunderstood. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. My questions then is the end of your abstract of this talk, which you didn't get to it except Chakra Pauchi. You're asking about whether non-realism's theatrical event can still have functions to cure, to transcend, as we move to a secular and scientific print. I think this is a good question to sort of discuss, explore how to explain these things.
Yeah. If I think of Sunda, I'm not sure that Dadan is considered to have the kind of power. And, I haven't spent a lot of time in Indonesia, but I know that Asep, when he was starting out, I found it so strange when he started doing ruwatan and other things like that, because his elder brother, Ade, was much more the type to have the kind of metaphysical power that was then the whole community participated in the belief that that was going to make things better, and it made things better. I mean, I remember times it was like it was a Suharto election year and other things like that. And the students were being arrested and Rendra was going in. And Abba did a ruwatan. And for that community, it did make it better. Things like that. Whether it could cure coronavirus, I'm not sure. But there was a strong belief in his ability to do it. Now, I went to ruwatan with other Dalangs who I don't think had that kind of power. So, I think the knowledge that makes you good about it does come from studying the Wayang. Some of the Dalang I've been most impressed by have gotten their knowledge through the Wayang, but I don't think that everyone quite gets it. Lots of people are more focused on the money, the music, the clowns, other things like that. And who in this generation really has that power? I would have to go back and walk around and see in the villages if it was working or not. You may talk more profoundly about the situation in Central Java. I think if I go to Bali, people like Cody, things like that, I think there's, a certain community that feels that power exists within him. I know that in the past, certain Topeng dancers have had it, but not all.
Right, I guess it's depending on the community.
Yeah.
I sort of remember this very strong comments from the late historian Reclaps, who really believed that Wayang and all traditional performing art in Indonesia will just vanish because of the Western influence and the deepening of Islamization. It was a little bit too strong, I guess. Right. So in a way, we can expand this discussion on this about the performing art in general, in terms of the changing of the plain song to electric, pop, and all of these things. well, it's a big topic, I guess, to
Yeah.
discuss.
I do, I do think that performing arts, when they are done right, have power. I can't say that. I think they have psychological impact, and that creates a community that takes care of the ill person in a different way. I've certainly seen that, and I think it continues to exist within certain kinds of mahjong, even though they can't do the outside ceremonies because of the Islamization, but for women who are suffering in unhappy marriages and other things like that, and it's made them ill. I have seen people who become better. For Corona, can't say.
Not
But
yet.
you can get through Corona better if you feel that total, community support and calmness, maybe.
Good, thanks.
We have a question from Ed Luna, question/comments.
Okay.
Hi, Kathy. So this is Ed Luna. Very nice presentation here. So I think it's a key point to say, like Topeng and Wayang, they sort of, for me, if I remember correctly, they sort of exist between like dimensions. So the dimensions of the living and then the great beyond, I guess you would say. And so Topeng and Wayang seem to me, they serve as sort of like portals between like these dimensions. And I think that's really important, just because they sort of exist in between like these major dimensions, and they can amass like great power just by acknowledging that they exist, in between these major categories. So that's one thing. And then my second comment was, so you've talked about other Southeast Asian examples, and I'm going to throw a really peripheral one here, which would be the Philippines. And I think because they don't really have like an established puppetry or even like a masked dance tradition. Whatever there was probably was sort of thrown out by the Spanish. But what they do, and it also plays into this manipulation by something that is in between, like living and non-living, are icons. So religious icons. So you see like images of the Santo Niño, so the Christ child, being threatened by dunking them in water if it doesn't, if it doesn't like intercede by providing rainfall, by providing ample rainfall. So that's one thing. And then the other icon, the other major icon I can think of is the Black Nazarene in Manila. That's paraded around Manila like around January, I believe, every year. And so you, on a normal year, you would see like throngs of people, just thousands and upon thousands of people trying to, if they can't really embrace the icon itself, because it's a rather large icon, but it's paraded, and you have all of these people sort of surrounding it. They try to get towels, and they try to get someone to wipe the icon itself, so it is imbued with the essence of that icon when they get it back, and it could sort of ward off disease and bring good luck and good fortune. So yeah, those were my comments.
Thank you very much. I think you're very right. I think for puppeteers or maskers, they would say the microcosm and the macrocosm, things like that. You don't actually need any puppets. You can, you know, do it with a picture. You can do it with nothing. You can do a ruwatan as a storyteller or things like that. And certainly Balian in the Philippines, you know, participated in the same kinds of things. They did not use the same story as far as I know, but the same practice or thinking about the relationship between the dead, the ancestors, and the manipulation of these greater powers than us exists throughout this whole area. We just see them going through Hindu, Buddhist, or Islamic permutations, in, you know, moving different way, but the practice itself and the idea that in performance you can activate these things is widely shared. So you're absolutely right. Certainly the Santo Nino is the one that I've known or seen images of and had friends who studied. Of course, it is the same thing.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mas Trist, would you like to make a comment? Maybe he's not there. Midianto is next.
Hi, thank you very much, Prof. Foley. It's great to hear your talk. It's always interesting and I always learn some things, especially from the philosophy perspective, which is the Wayang. It's not only being theoretically done, but there's a lot of huge of the practice have to be done as well. I was expecting more about what Dalang do, the knowledge of Dalang, thing like that, but this one is end up more about ruwatan, exorcism. Well, I will follow that as Pak Sumarsam said, and just to let you know that in nowadays, ruwatan is derailed from the traditional ruwatan. Who can do ruwatan in the past? It's only dalang that's been known and accepted by the community that you are dalang ruwat.
Yeah.
Firstly, and secondly, you don't do ruwatan because you're doing it, you want to. Somebody have to invite you, which is nowadays in this virtual, lots of dalang doing ruwatan without anyone asking. But I think that's just a good dalang if they do that because they care about corona. So like this, you know, you're not being asked, but you miss one element. If you do ruwatan, nobody asks you to do. Because in the second most important to be successful to do ruwatan, the host should also believe to the dalang that their badness have to be cured. So this one, if you do ruwatan corona, well, I guess even stronger, but they don't really mean it want to have ruwatan, you know, everyone wants to get rid of these corona things. But then what's interesting about your last statements about ruwatan thing is knowledge. So the dalang is have to qualify or the requirements as a dalang. Pak Sumarsam was mentioned about to be dalang last week. His lecture just want to add a couple more. We just number one, to be a dalang, you have to be gendeng, no gendeng. That means you have to know all the music of the gamelan. Impossible without learning that one. Number two, you have to be gandang. Gandang, that means you have to have a good voice in terms of long, big, or kind of vibrato. And then number three, you have to be gendong. You have to be a big head kind of person. And somehow, because you're representing many different characters in the box of puppets, there are 400. And then number four, which is relate to the ruwatan, what every dalang who do ruwatan, they have to use guna. So as a dalang, you have to have a guna, the knowledge. This knowledge is not knowledge how to do wayang, but then spiritual knowledge to do exorcism. That's part of my 5 cents and only. But okay, the last one is the cheptoning. Those names, those goddess who descendants who brother Mentorogo, Arjuna, actually those names of those goddesses only tool, a servant by Narada, and they lost, their failure. They supposed to bother Arjuna, chaptoning, to finish their meditation, because the power of his meditation shaken the realm of God. But instead, all of the names came to Arjuna to seduce him to finish his meditation. But those 7 names end up falling in love with Arjuna.
Mm-hmm.
That's
why there's 7. That's why.
Right. That's correct. Yes.
That's the male version. The female version, you know, she comes down, she stays have a baby, goes back home, and you know, rice. You have to. It's hard to get rice and everything after she's gone. So that's the female version. And Arjuna, you know, is one of the few ones that I know where he goes up. But it's still the same 7 women who are associated with the Pleiades and the goddesses or things like that. So it's one of those visitation encounters. And he is tough enough not to move.
Correct. So it's not only human being or commoners got a mistake or failure, even goddess, they make a huge failure.
Oh no, they get him in heaven. Each of them gets to spend one night with him.
Right.
So they got exactly what they wanted. They just didn't get it when they wanted it the first day.
Right. Well, when even he goes to the heaven, that's not what Arjuna's want. It's a gift. He doesn't want anything. He just be happy as a human being.
He wants pasupati.
Yeah, that's for the worldliness, but it's not for sake of the
pasupati is breaking the beast, which is related to this whole idea, and it's about pasupati shaivism, things like that, which we see, you know, with this guy who stands up from the burial ground and puts ashes on his body and takes up his club and seems to be associated with these kind of performance groups.
Well, yes. Okay. So, but this case is just like my situation, life, reality life. I'm happy to be lecturer, part-time lecturer, but then the school give me full-time job, which is I don't want it. In the beginning, part-time is happy enough. That's what I want. Okay, great lecture anyway. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Widianto, for the correction. And I didn't talk at all about holy water or, you know, people getting some of that holy water, in a real ruwatan with a good dalang, who does not have to have a good voice, but has to have spiritual power. You know, people are not going to that part of the performance to be entertained. They are being purified, but they really want to get some of that water to take home and swallow or use in the house. They will pass their exams. They told me I'd finish my PhD if I got. They saved some for me because they wanted to help me.
It's just to clarify, all of those 5 requirements for the dalang is no one have it. They can have 2 or 3. Yeah, serious dalang, they don't want to be gendeng. Crazy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mas Tris is with us now. If I'd like to jump in, Mas.
Very much. Good afternoon, good evening in US time. Ibu Kathy, congratulations for your great presentations, and I would also like to congratulate about your webinar yesterday held in Jogja that I heard received very good impressions and also appreciations. My question is, not about the way how dalang that was high respected back in Indonesia, but my question is mainly related to your own experience and how the appreciations of one Western audience when you perform your wayang, and also other appreciations perhaps from what you did performance back in Indonesia, how Indonesian people respond to your experience and expertise on that. I know that Indonesian governments enjoyed that very much when, sorry to use a foreigner and local, something like that, but somehow that is kind of good opportunity for younger generations perhaps to follow up your rules or to continue the traditions that you and other foreigners dalangs might would like to pass on the traditions to foreign people. Thank you very much again. Congratulations. If you could please to share with us, that would be greatly appreciated. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for the question. I will give the example of my first performance in a village. I was totally amazed. This was doing Wayang Cepak, and it was Dalang Otong had been teaching me that, and he was having a ceremony for his family, and decided that I should do the cowl performance of it, which is the normal way that you do your first thing. So of course the trees, the walls, everything were super packed. It was like a Sepsunandar was there, and I was like, what is going on? Usually when I went with Otong, we didn't have that many, but and then the other more amazing thing was nobody said anything. They were totally enraptured because I was using Sundanese, and they wanted to hear it or to hear me when I said something that was wrong, so they could all laugh uproariously at it. And the next day, of course, I was driving my motorcycle back, and all of the kids in the streets were yelling, "Ibu Dalang, Ibu Dalang." And a lot of people told me that they were amazed, and it wasn't at all bad for a woman. I thought they were going to say it wasn't bad for a foreigner, but hey, I was as good as the other women. So I would say, anytime when I was just traveling along and had to do certain things during the clown scenes or sing, I used to get fan mail from all over West Java. If you were on TV with your dalang, then suddenly you could get on a train or a bus anywhere. I will never be as famous as I was as a student studying Wayang or doing, some of these small performances in Sundanese in villages. You become very well known within that particular area. Something for Sundanese Wayang is not really taught at all within the university. It was sort of taught for a while at the high school, but it was not really being taught by anyone who really knew that much about Wayang Golek. It's a village tradition when I was studying it, and I think it's still a village tradition. So there's certain dalang that are important. You go into that system and learn it that way, but it's not like Central Java or Bali where, the students are going into the high school and then coming out in the same way. It's a different system.
Great, thank you very much. Just want to you think Western acceptance on the teaching methods and pass on the traditions of puppets through Western scholars or Western students?
I've had a number of students who study and then go to Indonesia, sometimes to Bali, sometimes to Jogja. They're usually going on a Dharma Siswa or something like that. and do become performers. The hardest thing for anyone within Wayang is the language. You know, music is a problem too, but language makes it it's much easier, I believe, to become a dancer or musician, at least on some of the instruments. But as you're pointing out, you need to know all of that. You need to have language as well. You know, my only benefit is when people need someone to do a Wayang in English. You know, so when they're coming here and invite me to go to Washington to perform with EC, they're only inviting me because I can do English, and most of the Indonesian dalangs can't. And also I know something about Western audiences. Something I'd say about Western audiences is they want everything to be their idea of authentic or traditional. Some people get very bent out of shape when you have the clowns talking, as the clowns always would, within an Indonesian framework about things that are going on, or coronavirus right now, or things like that. They want it to be holy and distant. And the idea of how Wayang actually operates for some of them will not fit their more Orientalist idea of how it should be.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Very, very inspiring presentation.
Thank you.
Jessica just popped in with a question. Would you like to jump on, Jessica?
Sure. Hi, Kathy. Thank
Hello.
you.
How are you doing?
Good, good. It's great to hear you. It's great to be together with everyone again. I just was so excited once you brought up the subject of language, and Mastris was talking about your performances as a dalang, and I just wondered if you could tell us about your philosophy behind using particular Sundanese texts inside of an English wayang. I always enjoyed that in your performances, the way you use certain things to be invocations, which feels like it is a function of that text in the original language, and then you respect that by still using those kind of, I don't know if the word incantation or invocation, I would love to hear you just talk about those different plays of the uses of language.
The passages you're talking about are usually Kakawan. They're in Kawi, which no dalang understands. They sort of understand some of it, and it has no correspondence to Old Javanese Kawi or things like that. Some, maybe the root words, but is more interrelated to what their grandfathers and great-grandfathers and great-great-grandfathers were saying when they were along the coast. So those are things that do not change. There's one or two of them that are identified as actually coming from the Barata Yudas and actual Kakawan in the old Javanese style, but the language is all messed up. But you just do what your teacher did, and it is the sound of that words and the attachment to all of the dalang that go before that flavors those things. So they are not about translation. They are about a very strong part of some of these performance things. It's not like Western stuff. We educate and we entertain, but these are secrets. Some of this stuff is about secret knowledge, secret wisdom, other things like that. You know, people would always tell me, you know, it's not your studying, you know, if you're gonna get your PhD, just meditate at night. You drink some of this water that we got from the ruwatan, you know, keep yourself calm, find the core, you'll be fine, things like that. So it's a different way of working. And to understand those kind of passages or mantra. It is the hiddenness or the riddles or the understanding of some of the root words. Sometimes it will zong to you when you're getting it. So you begin everything by doing it rote, and over time it grows and encompasses you. So it's that idea of language as a sacred, poetical, empowered kind of sounding, rather than here's the message. It's not as simple as that when you're talking to these different layers.
Thank you, Kathy.
I had a question about these different ceremonies. You spoke a little bit about like Bali, Central Java, Sundanese. Do you notice that there's, in the time of Corona, a similar emphasis on, I don't know, different methods for like helping the communities in these situations, or is it like different in different parts of Indonesia, where, you know, maybe one is more community focused, one's more health focused, or something like that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not in Indonesia right now. The example that I gave you of Dadan, he's done a number of performances or things like that. I think he's been hired by the Kabupaten. His family is really important, and therefore they're putting him on TV, having him do some of these kinds of things, sort of as public announcements or things like that, and, you know, sort of popular, accessible information. So the clowns are giving, you know, very clear information that is then repeated by the health minister and other things like that. I'm not there to see what the whole shebang is like right now. You know, the things that I know are more things that people tell me, oh, this is going on in Bali or things like that. So I don't have any handle, and it would take people who are actually in each of those places looking around and seeing what's going on.
Yeah, thank you very much. Does anybody have any last questions or comments? Like to pop in with anything? Well, people just saying in the comment section that they really loved the lecture.
Okay.
So a lot of fans. So I guess we'll call it an evening and say thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Kathy, for coming and giving such a wonderful presentation. And I hope everybody comes back next Sunday for Pat Joko's new composition workshop and lecture. So that should be very, very fun. And look forward to seeing everybody. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Kathy.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Bugatti.
Thank you.